I'm an alcoholic. You bring up the moral issue, and other countries use this, and it's maybe effective for other countries.
Right.
However, the U.S. doesn't do it because it's immoral.
Yeah.
So to that end,
And
I'm sure
it's ineffective too for the long term.
ineffective in the long term. That makes sense. Now, I'm sure there's people probably listening like, oh, well, what about advanced, interrogation, things like that?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts as far as like how that has been used in the past? And
It means like the what do we call the EITs, the interrogation techniques we used against kind of Al Qaeda members. In the
Yeah,
past?
exactly.
Oh, okay, so the idea of torture or not.
right.
So this brings up a whole bunch of kind of interesting points, but I go back to the period. Well, first of all, it was legal. The enhancing interrogation techniques were signed off by the George Bush administration, by the Department of Justice. These were legal methods in which we could interrogate, or the U.S. government, I got to be careful, could interrogate prisoners.
Right.
Some people call it torture, some people don't, but ultimately it was legal. So keep that in mind. That doesn't mean it was the right thing to do, but it was deemed by kind of the U.S. government to be appropriate. Now, after 9/11, there was this tremendous fear that a second attack was coming. So it was just a different time. And the fact is that all these things that we were authorized to do, including what we'll call it EITs, was fully briefed to Congress.
Really?
And members of both parties, Republican and Democrats, some of whom on both sides kind of threw a fit when this kind of broke in public. Well, they were pretty eager for this to happen,
Right.
Because people were so scared about a second attack, and there was this desire to get information. So let me just kind of put that in perspective. Now, there's also the question of, does this work or not? Is it useful? And I think the jury's still out on that.
Oh, really?
The idea of putting extreme pressure on someone, if you want to call it torture or not, but just the idea of extreme pressure is, can you get accurate information? Some people say you can, some people say you cannot. I kind of end the whole notion on this, though, is that I don't think we're going to do it again.
Right.
And so, when Donald Trump came into office, he's like, we're gonna start torturing people again, and it's just nonsensical. He's trying to act tough,
Right.
Got it, but no one in their right mind in the intelligence services are like, there's no fucking way we're touching that. I don't care what it is. There's, it's just so controversial, and so I just don't think it's ever going to happen, in our lifetime again, because there's a question on whether it works, but there's just the idea of morality and is this something that Americans want to?
Right. Similar to the honeypot thing. Like, is the information effective?
Right.
Is this useful in the long term?
Absolutely.
Right.
So, there's some people who swear it was effective, but I just don't think it's ever going to happen. And so it's important to kind of, openly discuss what was done in the past. But I don't think it's going to be ever repeated. Certainly, again, it's, when Trump was saying that he wants to, and I think it was kind of machismo. He was trying to,
Sure.
People back in my old building were like that there's no one in their right mind would do that.
Yeah.
Just too controversial.
And you got to think, are there other methods that are as effective or maybe 10% less effective, but way less unethical?
Absolutely.
That we could implement
right.
that wouldn't
Sure.
cause any controversy.
Yep.
Oh,
Right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell me about the time that you were present during, I guess, like one of those interrogations?
So I was never in a black site. I never was present in any of that kind of stuff. Nobody believes me when I say that.
Right.
But I just, for whatever reason, I wasn't. What I did see, and this, it's an interesting point, is, when I first went to Afghanistan in March 2002. So our first teams went in, September 11 happened. Our teams went in October. So I went February, March. And so that's, a couple months later. And we were scooping up Al Qaeda members all over the place. And so there was plenty of Al Qaeda members, who we had, not in secret sites, but were just U.S. military, U.S. government had in holding, trying to figure out what the hell we're going to do with them. But I remember, and this is, this kind of certainly shaped my view of this. I would look at this and these are not Afghans, by the way. These are Arabs. These are people from Algeria or Morocco or Tunisia or Syria or Jordan. These are the hardcore kind of Al Qaeda Arabs, and they would look at you, Mark, and if they weren't handcuffed or shackled, they would rip your head off, or they would be happy to come to America and kind of gut your parents and your sister and your brother and your neighbors.
Right.
These were absolute. What I looked at was evil. It was fucking scary. And so, and the reason why I tell that story is you have to keep in mind, who we were fighting against.
Right.
There's no rehabilitation on them. That's not to say we have to go. We can't kill prisoners. You can't do that. But these were truly awful human beings who were solely dedicated to killing Americans. That's it. And so I kind of like to remind people of that notion, and in particular when we talk about kind of the things we did over the years, particularly our the programs that the intelligence community and special operations community ran to kind of degrade and destroy Al Qaeda. I have no problem with that. The idea that we have to, there's a famous kind of Israeli notion of you have to kill your enemy before they kill you. I'm okay with that because these are irredeemable individuals. It's not to say if they're captured, you have to treat them humanely, but they're pretty awful,
right?
And so that kind of tailored my view of all this of all time. So enhanced interrogation techniques, should we have done it? Probably not. And then your listeners might be horrified. Do I fucking lose sleep on what we did? Not for a second.
Right.
I don't.
Right.
And when I say what I'm going to say, just take it or leave it. I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
And now that's not to say we should do it again. I don't lose any sleep because these people were pure evil.
Now you'd mentioned, I forget if it was in the book or not, but that you had seen someone getting rough with, I guess, a detainee, and then someone, either you or someone from the team, stepped in and stopped it.
Yeah,
Can
and
you
that
tell me
happened.
about that?
That's I really shouldn't. I probably shouldn't have even said that part. But it was that story was cleared. But ultimately, it was an interrogation where, it was a foreign government service who kind of started roughing up someone, which is clearly what happened when we weren't there, but we had to, just based on our laws, again, people don't understand this, we had to kind of call it off,
right?
Because again, you can't abuse prisoners of that notion, separate from what the enhanced interrogation program did,
Sure.
At a separate time. But it's just again, because there's two things: one, it's unethical, but also it's not, so let's say you see someone beating up a prisoner, well, that again, the prisoner is going to probably say anything. How are you going to trust that information? So that really wasn't something that we could kind of
interesting
go forward on.
Now, I wonder for you, like, that is such an interesting point. Like the rehabilitation point, I think is so interesting.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I don't know if you can tell, despite being in the CIA, I've never actually, I don't have any war experience, right? Like I have family that's in war, but like,
right.
I think a lot of Americans, especially people in New York, are kind of out of touch with like what war zones are really like, and what it's like dealing with people that hate America and hate you, and it's probably a very strange situation. I'm curious, like for you speak Arabic, you have a deep connection with like Arab culture and the way of life. However, you're dealing with like Middle Easterners, Iraqis, Afghans that hate you, and that you feel a lot of probably like I don't know, like animosity towards.
Sure.
Is it difficult to kind of balance those two feelings?
Because the reality is, so in all the things we're doing, we actually were working with some of those host country governments. So, the Jordanian, the Egyptian, the Saudi intelligence services were huge allies of ours as we're trying to track down their nationals who have gone astray and turned to Al Qaeda. And we're trying to kill not only Americans, but also the Jordanian royal family or the Egyptian government or the Saudi royal family. So I can still have a love of the people and the culture. I loved living in the Middle East. The call to prayer 5 times from the mosque. I never converted to Islam, but I had respect for the religion. It was really even when I would hear the call to prayer, if I would just travel back now, it's a comforting feeling. I'm used to that. So I respect the culture and the religion and the people.
Right. Do you create a separation between obviously like all these Muslims that you know and love, and then I guess like Muslim radicals?
Of course.
And how does that delineate?
It's easy. I mean,
Really?
it's because they're criminals. These are terrorists and criminals, and so I always kind of, this is going to sound interesting. So, my time in Afghanistan and Iraq, I had a different war than the regular enlisted kind of grunt in the U.S. military. And so, if you watch films such as Restrepo or so really really powerful films of what the U.S. what an enlisted U.S. military member experience in Afghanistan, which is their friends getting killed or maimed. Not understanding what they're doing there, really stupid decisions sometimes by the U.S. military, and the trauma of that, that's awful. That was not my war. And what I say was, my job again, and this is just kind of being blunt, and this is what my friends from the special operations community also kind of say, is our job was to find, fix, and finish the enemy. That's it. And it was going after high value targets, going after Al Qaeda and Taliban members who were trying to kill Americans. And so, when I spent a year running a paramilitary base in Afghanistan along the Pak-Afghan border, I didn't go out on patrol, meeting village elders. I didn't go out. We weren't building wells. We weren't winning hearts and minds. Our job was to find the Al Qaeda and Taliban members in our area and kill them. And I put that in really kind of harsh, strict terms. But when I say there's a purity, there's a simpleness in that which actually makes it easier.
Right.
Because I didn't, I didn't see the corrupt nature of the Afghan government. I didn't see the carnage of war that inevitably happens, even if the U.S. is trying to limit civilian casualties. Terrible things happen. Our job was very surgically to kind of go after terrorists.
Right. It's very simple in that regard.
Very simple in that regard. And so, and I knew that those people are evil. They're trying to kill my friends. They're trying to kill my family members. They're trying to kill everyone here in New York City again.
Right.
So there's something that makes it, there's a lack of ambiguity in that, which is good.
Right.
Because the rest of the war was a kind of a giant cluster.
Yeah.
With a corrupt Afghan government. U.S. military plans that would, wildly diverge.
Yeah.
Now we want to have democracy and women's rights in Afghanistan. Very noble.
Yeah.
But we stayed far too long. Taking a village, taking some territory, taking a province, and then seeing it ceded back to the Taliban. And you see U.S. Marines kind of rotate through Kandahar year after year, getting shot up and chewed up. Yet, for what?
Mm-hmm.
Very different though than my role.
Right. Now,
in the counterterrorism fight.
That role being so surgical, I guess I'm curious, did you ever have like empathy for some of these people, like Al Qaeda members that you were capturing?
Yeah.
That you're like, damn, like you're like a 19-year-old guy. Your life has been awful, both by like from your government and
right.
You've just been fucked over, and now you have this like hatred and evil inside of you. Did you ever see that side and you're like,
nope.
Damn, really?
No. It was very black and white for me.
Right.
Now I would say with the Taliban is different. So again, Al Qaeda is a terrorist group dedicated to killing Americans, and certainly, obviously, they took down.
I don't really know the difference between Al Qaeda.
So Al Qaeda, was the group that kind of that certainly took down the World Trade Center, hit the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Had a global kind of movement to kill Americans worldwide. The Taliban is just, and Al Qaeda was made up of members of different countries throughout the Arab world. The Taliban are different. The Taliban were true Afghans, and what the Taliban did is they gave shelter to Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. That's why they became our enemy.
And they work together.
But so and some of the Taliban senior membership, and certainly their kind of their operational cadre, killed a lot of American soldiers, which is why they were kind of on our target list.
Mm-hmm.
But a regular Taliban member, well, if you're a goat herder in Afghanistan and they're coming in your area, you're going to join the Taliban. So in that sense, yes, because these were people with second and third grade educations in a country that is was medieval in terms of its kind of relationship with the rest of the world. And so there was the kind of the foot soldiers of the Taliban often and here's a perfect example. I remember talking to an Afghan one time and I said, "Tell me what you did the last 40 years or 30 years." And he said, "Well, I was a member of the, I supported the Afghan government a long time ago. Then the communist regime came in. So I supported the communist regime supported by the Soviet Union. But then when the Soviets invaded, I became a member of the Mujahideen, fighting the Soviets. Then the Taliban came back. And so I was supported the Taliban. Then you guys came, I'm supporting you. But probably when the Taliban takes over, because you guys are going to leave, which we did, I'll probably go back to them. Because why? Because they're survivors."
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't have any. I understood that. I think when it came though to the hardcore Al Qaeda members, it was black and white for me.
No rehabilitation. Nope. There's nothing
None.
you could do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
And again,
wild.
so if you are involved in some of the stuff that I did, or you're a member of the special operations community, that's you have to have that kind of singular focus.
Right.
I did not have any sympathy for the people that we removed
right
from the battlefield, because if we didn't, they're going to come kill Americans. I mean,
Right.
it's black and white. It's pure and simple. There's no rehabilitation program. There's no kind of, getting an education in prison and coming back, which is, in modern countries can work.
Right.
Not there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just hard for me to even fathom, I guess. I've never met someone, I've never looked at someone that wanted to kill me.
They would.
It's never happened.
Yep. So I'll tell you. So I'm not the bravest person of all time in any sense. I serve with people who are much braver than I, but I remember looking at some of these folks and I was like, that dude's fucking scary.
Is there something that's like
good thing he's fucking handcuffed?
Is there almost like are you familiar with like the uncanny valley type of effect where like you see like a robot or some type of AI that is extremely human,
right?
But there's something that you can tell about it that like, oh, it doesn't, it's not perfectly human. Like, is there something about evil that you found with humans?
I mean, so indoctrinated, with hate.
How does evil corrupt someone like that in your experience? Like, I'm curious what you think.
Oh, that's a great question. So, and what happened over the years is that Al Qaeda was able to kind of take advantage of things, of kind of the mosque, the madrasa, which is kind of young schools in the Arab world, systems in which they kind of brainwash kids. I mean, it's a cult. So it's a religious cult, and so we see that phenomena, throughout the world. But it's again, it's the notion of also becoming so indoctrinated that they're willing to kind of become a suicide bombers. What an interesting phenomenon,
right?
You're willing to kill yourself, for the greater good in their mind.
Now, do you think most of these people that greater good, is it a devotion to country? Is it a devotion to Allah?
It's to God. Yeah. It's their version, their kind of warped version of Islam.
Right. Now, I want to be clear. Yeah, that we're not talking about Muslims. We're not talking about Afghans or Iraqis. We're talking about radical fundamentalists.